So we had heard from John Adams of the Knoxville News Sentinel about where exactly Tennessee falls in the NIL pecking order right now. And I think we would agree that they're as put together, buttoned up, fundraised, whatever the term you want to use, as just about anybody in the nation. We had heard the same about LSU, but if that's the case, then they've done so more recently, according to Matt Moscona, joined us and talked about that beatdown that Tennessee laid on LSU and also where they are in regards to Tennessee and other teams in NIL fundraising. And good news is Tennessee, according to Matt, is in pretty good shape. Live at SEC Media Days in Nashville, Tennessee. Still doesn't sound right to me, but that's where we are. We've done the Birmingham, we've done the Atlanta. I think we're going to Dallas next year. So Matt Moscona joins us now. He's with basically ESPN everywhere in Louisiana.
Yeah, that's about right.
Basically, that's pretty cool. Alexandria, Baton Rouge, New Orleans, Lafayette, Lake Charles, and some Tennessee fans enjoyed the trip to Louisiana last year. That was one of the most bizarre games in retrospect that unfolded in front of my eyes.
It was definitely LSU's worst game played of the year, starting literally with the opening kickoff when they muffed it. And Tennessee was fantastic. I would have loved to have seen, I'm sure Tennessee fans agree with this, I would love to have seen what it would have looked like had Hendon Hooker not gotten injured. I felt terrible for him. I still think in spite of that, he still should have won the Heisman. But the game in Baton Rouge was that's one of those burn the tape games, right? I don't know that LSU could have taken anything positive from anything that happened in that game that day in Baton Rouge. It was very clearly Tennessee's day on a sunshiny morning that started bad and ended bad for LSU.
If I would have told you that LSU was going to end up in Atlanta on that Sunday after, what would you have said?
No way. Would have never agreed with that because I certainly would have thought they'd lose to Alabama. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to lose to Alabama, then there's no way you could have won any type of tie break to overcome that. So, but credit LSU for finding the footing the way they did, for beating Ole Miss, for beating Florida, obviously for beating Alabama, and finding their way to Atlanta. It was a great year one for Brian Kelly, but it didn't come without its pitfalls. Obviously, the Tennessee game, the Florida State game, the season opener, where I don't know that they could have. You muff two punch, you miss a PAT. You can't do it against a good team. So there was a lot of good. It was way more good than bad, But that October game in Baton Rouge against the Vols was a lot of bad.
Is there a quarterback you would take in the league over Jaden Daniels right now?
Nope. I think this is the worst year for quarterbacks in the SEC since 2014. 2013, remember, Manziel had just won the Heisman. McCarron had won a couple national championships. He was a junior that year. No, he was a senior that year. You had Aaron Murray at Georgia who set every record. You had Zach Mettenberger at LSU in 2013. Connor Shaw won 11 games twice at South Carolina. James Franklin went to 2 SEC championship games at Missouri. I mean, it was a deep, talented quarterback league in 2013. And then they were all gone. And 2014 was an abomination. And I think the fact that we're here this week, there's only 5 quarterbacks that are coming to SEC Media Days. 5. Like, in many respects, when you look at who a school brings to Media Days, it is somewhat of a commentary on their program. And certainly, when you look at only 5 quarterbacks, it goes to show you where the dearth is in the league. And it's at the most important position this year, which means Arkansas with KJ Jefferson, LSU with Jaden Daniels, see about Joe Milton at Tennessee, Spencer Rattler at South Carolina could make things interesting. I think those are the programs that you look at and go, Will Rogers at Mississippi State is a returning starter. Or those are the teams that can make noise because they got veteran, experienced, talented quarterback.
And I think Joe Milton was a close call. There are a lot of good speakers on that team that they wanted to represent, but it would have looked really bad for Tennessee not to bring Joe Milton with a Nico sitting on the bench.
Yeah, look, I believe, Dave, this really comes down to what do you expect out of this event, right? I think the league should mandate quarterback. Every team bring a quarterback.
Okay.
I believe that. And I understand that coaches treat this in many respects like a reward sometimes, veteran players who you're going to bring. And I understand that. But ultimately, it's SEC media days. It's not here's a reward for a veteran guy on your team. It's all the media comes from all over the conference, some from all over the country, and we're here to tell interesting stories. How can you possibly have this event without Devin Leary from Kentucky?
Fair.
Coming in from NC State after Georgia feels like a wide open SEC East, and you don't have Devin Leary here, that's inexcusable. Like that's the type of. I'm going off on a tangent here. I think every team should always bring a quarterback. Always.
I've talked to several people around the SEC. One that is from Louisiana. He spent time down there, and I don't know who the personal injury attorney is, but he said there are personal injury attorneys with LSU players on it. And he said, I really feel like, and he travels a lot, he knows the conference. He said it feels like the two programs that are playing the NIL game the best, hands down, not close in the SEC. It's Tennessee and LSU. What do you think of the way they're playing the NIL game right
now? I think LSU. So first of all, strictly from a fundraising standpoint, LSU is very far behind.
Okay.
When NIL went live on July 1st 2 years ago, they took Olivia Dunn and some people out to Times Square in New York City, if you remember this, and they had put a billboard in Times Square and said, NILSU was this thing they coined, and it was basically we're open for business. And it's weird to put yourself back in that mindset, but at the time that NIL went live, not everybody was on board. Coaches, administrators weren't all okay with it. So LSU kind of made this big, bold public statement to say, we're open for business. We're in favor of it. What they didn't do was fundraise. What they didn't do was organize. They didn't have their boosters. They're collected, all ready to go. And so LSU was behind and is still behind as far as fundraising for their collective. The benefit that LSU has and will always have is LSU is the only Power 5 school in a talent-rich state. So there are always going to be kids who grew up in that state who would give their arm to wear that. Will Campbell, 5-star offensive tackle, started as a true freshman. Will Campbell, you assume cut off his leg and have him play anywhere else. He just was never leaving anywhere. He had opportunities. He was just never going to go anywhere else. That's the benefit that LSU is always going to have. That's going to allow them to be more competitive even if they can't spend in the NIL space like other schools will. So what LSU has done, I would say more appropriately, is in the transfer portal, Brian Kelly has been selective and identified players and character guys at positions of need that fit what they want to do. He was very intentional year one, bringing guys in from the portal who were from Louisiana who didn't have an LSU offer coming out of high school. Guys who went and played 3-4 years of college football elsewhere, and now they're veteran guys who had a chance to come home. Greg Brooks, Joe Fouché, Jarek Bernard Converse, Noah Kane, guys like that, who became a big part of what LSU did a year ago that were really excited just to come home and play for the state school. So he's done it a little differently. And he's had to do it a little differently because LSU, while the perception might be that they're advanced in the NIL space, they're not. Now you do have superstars like Olivia Dunn and Angel Reese who have made a lot of money because of their fame and celebrity, but that's not LSU-backed businesses. Those are national accounts that those young athletes are doing.
That's interesting. So the perception is maybe a little bit different than the reality. I have a theory, but how does a guy, and it may have to do with NIL, but how does a guy like Jordan Matthews get out of Louisiana and to a Tennessee? We were talking about.
I think there's always going to be exceptions. So like what I just mentioned about Will Campbell, right? There are going to be exceptions and always have been of guys that are going to leave. And if you're LSU, you can't take every player in the state. So this past year, Arch Manning from New Orleans went to Texas, right? Eli Holstein from Zachary, which is just north of Baton Rouge, went to Alabama. You had a 5-star defensive back from the Lafayette area also go to Texas. You're going to lose guys. I mean, Devontae Smith was a 5-star from Kentwood, Louisiana. became a Heisman Trophy winner at Alabama. You're going to lose some. You can't take them all. You're not going to get them all. But LSU's always going to get enough to keep the cupboard full. It's kind of how that goes.
So funny that this time last year we're talking about Brian Kelly doing an accent, Brian Kelly in a dance video. My things have really changed in 365. How beloved is he now? Or is he beloved?
The LSU fan base embraced him immediately. That was never a thing. The national narrative around Brian Kelly was about him saying family and dancing with the recruit, all those things that went viral. Because I think a lot of people looked, and Dave, context is important as well. Because keep in mind, what Brian Kelly inherited was a mess. Like when Ed Ogeron left, I mean, when they played Kansas State in that bowl game, they had 39 scholarship players available. I mean, he inherited half a roster, like literally. So he inherited a mess, and then there was all the stuff that went viral. But that wasn't the reality of what was going on. Like we just talked about how he rebuilt the roster. He hired good coaches. He himself, Brian Kelly's won everywhere he's been for 4 decades, man. He took the LSU job as the winningest active coach in college football. I mean, the guy didn't he knew how to coach. He knew how to build a roster. He knew what he was trying to do. So I think what's changed is when you go win 10 games and you beat Alabama and you win the West, now all of a sudden the conversation is about football. Whereas last year it was, can he spell etouffee? And I remember you and I talked on the last day of media days last year. And, the conversation that I had was, man, with LSU, the perception is because Louisiana is culturally so different, which it is, right? I mean, we agree, even in the footprint of the South, right? Louisiana, all the French, Cajun heritage and roots, it's different. But people love their culture and embrace it. But if you love them back, the kindest people, they'll put a big bear hug around you, love you forever. That's why guys like Drew Brees, who aren't from here, are beloved. Joe Burrow, he'll be beloved forever. But, with Brian Kelly, he came in and he won. And the thing that I tell people all the time is, man, the winningest coaches ever at LSU, Skip Bertman in baseball, 5 national championships, Jewish guy from Miami, Dale Brown, Minot, North Dakota, Nick Saban, son of a miner in West Virginia who spent his whole career in the Midwest. They all just win. Take advantage. You will have all the resources you need. Use them and win. You do that, people will love you. That's all. I mean, that's what Brian Kelly came out and did. So all of the ancillary stuff around Kelly was never internal. It was never anything that was talked about around LSU. If anything, it was more LSU fans feeling like they had to defend their guy. But, Brian Kelly, you'll win 10 games, and the conversation goes away a little bit.
Ed Orgeron, who coached a year at Tennessee, it was quite a memorable year.
Yeah.
If I ever have the time, I might write a book on that. But Ed Orgeron expressed interest through his agent or whatever in the Northwestern job. I think we can agree that's kind of silly.
Yeah.
But does he coach again? Because the things I've heard, and you've heard more than me, but the things I've heard got so off the rails. If I'm an AD, that's a guy I'm putting the black mark through, with all due respect to Ed.
I think Ed – so, first of all, hat tip, Sheldon Mickles from The Advocate caught up with Ed last week.
Okay.
And Ed said he's retired, that he has no interest in coaching again. I mean, quote, I'm done with that stuff. He's splitting time between Baton Rouge and Miami. He's newly $17 million. I think he's enjoying – he'll be 62 later this month. I think he's enjoying spending time with his sons, who are all now young in their coaching careers. He says he runs 4 miles a day and stays fit. And it's like, I think he's enjoying not having the stress and pressure of going 5 a.m. to 11 p.m. A lot of coaches say that.
They do.
And a lot of them have trouble turning off that switch. That competitive thing that makes them, you know what I mean? They struggle to turn that off. We'll see if Ed can stay retired. But, Dave, if he is retired, and I mean, candidly, Ed and I, we didn't have a great relationship when he was right. Okay? So, just full disclosure, it's nothing personal. I didn't think he was a great head coach. And a lot of people felt the same. But he's a guy who started his career as a grad assistant at Northwestern State, begged for an assistant strength and conditioning coordinator job at Arkansas in the early 80s, and did the grind that coaches do, where you make no money and beg for your opportunity, crush it and get a better opportunity, and so on. And he put together a hell of a career for himself. The head coaching career obviously was not distinguished. I mean, Ole Miss was a disaster, and outside of the sterling 2019, which is the greatest thing any of us have ever seen, he was largely a disaster at LSU. But as a recruiting coordinator, as a line coach, as someone who was part of championship teams at LSU and USC, he carved out a really nice coaching career for himself. And if that is it, hat tip to him.
Maybe the greatest overachiever in the history of college football. And that's a backhanded compliment. I wouldn't say it in front of him. But
I wouldn't say it in front of him. But
he likes me. He doesn't like you. You can say it in front of him.
I would not. But I would be cordial. But I think you would even agree. As far as a recruiter, few better.
Agreed.
Defensive line coach, technically elite at that as well. He just wasn't a great head coach. And, I often say he Forrest-Gumped his way into the national championship. But it feels like that, But give him credit for assembling the roster and the staff and the positions they did to put that season together. And, I wouldn't trade it for anything.
Yeah, pretty good stuff. If you're in Louisiana, Matt Moscona, and he's fantastic. He's in all the stations: ESPN, Alexandria, Baton Rouge, New Orleans, Lafayette, Lake Charles, and Matt. We appreciate it. Thanks for taking the time.
My pleasure, Dave. Thanks.